I extend my warm welcome to one and all. Hope everybody is safe and healthy at their own places. In the hardships faced by the world due to the pandemic, there still lies a ray of hope to stay strong and going. I, Aditi Sharma, welcome you all for this lovely session in this beautiful morning. As it is rightly said, that change is the only thing which is constant today, and we people have to adapt to the situations around us and work together for the better well-being. So not wasting too much of time, let's get rolling. Today, for the next couple of hours, we are going to understand the in-depth details about the startups. As the government of India supports this to a very great extent in order to stabilize the current economic situations also. We are so glad that Jaipur branch was very much under this acknowledgement and under the special guidance of our Central Council member, CA Prakash Sharma ji, was thoughtful enough to conduct such kind of a beautiful session today. I request our chairperson, CA Akash Barodi, to please welcome all our members today. Please, Akash ji.
Thank you, Aditi ma'am, and I extend my warm welcome to today's speaker, Harshita ma'am, and also our very own Central Council member from Jaipur, Prakash Sharma sir, जो हमको time to time हर चीज का guidance देते रहते हैं. And I also welcome each and every participant of this webinar. और मैं बताना चाहूँगा कि जैसे सबको पता है कि ये डे जो अपना 1st of July को अपन सेलिब्रेट करते हैं, तो जयपुर ब्रांच this time has decided to celebrate this day on a fortnight basis. हम 15 days का एक celebration program हमने किया है, that started from 21st of June and that will end from 5th of July. And उसी बीच में हमने बहुत सारे प्रोग्राम करते थे, right from yoga day पे, then sanitary distribution, then women बेटी बचाओ बेटी पढ़ाओ, इस तरीके से हमने पूरे 15 दिन के प्रोग्राम रखे थे. आज हमारा एक 35 रन का प्रोग्राम था ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दिस कोविड अवेयरनेस एंड वी हैव सक्सेसफुली डन इट एंड बहुत मेंबर्स का बहुत अच्छा रिस्पॉन्स आया. और इसी बीच में बताना चाहूँगा 1st of July we are organizing a blood donation camp and a vaccination camp for the CA members and their family and students. So I request all the participants to participate in this noble cause. As we know कि अभी कोविड पैंडेमिक इसमें ब्लड की रिक्वायरमेंट बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ गई है. ब्लड बैंक में ब्लड नहीं है बिल्कुल भी. So we just want and I request from this medium to all the members कि आप मैक्सिमम से मैक्सिमम इस ब्लड डोनेशन कैंप में पार्टिसिपेट करें, so that अपन एज अ चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट अपन अपनी सोसाइटी को भी एक मैसेज दें और अपन अपना एक कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन उनको दें. एंड फर्स्ट और लास्ट में बताना चाहूँगा जयपुर ब्रांच इज ऑलवेज trying to do as much as program on the non-technical, non-traditional topics. हमने IDB के लिए प्रोग्राम करे हैं, हमने अदर टॉपिक्स पे प्रोग्राम किए, एंड टुडे वी आर ऑर्गेनाइजिंग प्रोग्राम ऑन on startup. एंड मैं हर्षिता मैम को थैंक यू बोलना चाहूँगा कि केम अप विद दी बहुत ही यूनिक टॉपिक है, कैसे स्टार्टअप से क्या फंड रेजिंग, क्या कॉन्सेप्ट होना चाहिए, क्या उनकी कंप्लाइंसेज है, बिकॉज दिस इज जहाँ तक मुझे याद है फर्स्ट प्रोग्राम है इस टॉपिक पे. तो एंड थैंक यू बोलना चाहूँगा प्रकाश सर को फॉर टेकिंग सच गुड इनिशिएटिव, क्योंकि उनके इनिशिएटिव से प्रोग्राम पूरा लॉन्च होता है. So thank you very much. And now over to Aditi.
Thank you, Akash ji. May I now request CA Prakash Sharma ji to please address this session.
Good morning, friends. Respected Chairman of Jaipur Branch, Dynamic Chairman Akash Barghoti ji, today's speaker, one of the youngest speaker from our profession, Harshita Kushwah ji, today's moderator, very well known to we all. She used to moderate so many our annual functions, different seminar conferences, Aditi Sharma ji, and my friends. I welcome you all in this session of fundraising and compliance support for Indian startups. Friends, before coming to the technical topic, I would just like to request you all that in our one of the local newspaper, there is a big heading that variant third, like variant plus has entered in our state. And we have seen in the month of May, the time when COVID wave 2 was in full swing. And we cannot even think that the way we all were tense, the way all hospitals, everything was so in bad shape. So my sincere request to all my colleagues is please, 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 our first intention is all those members plus their relatives, please, if you are not got vaccinated till date, get vaccinated as soon as possible. And we are going to organize a vaccination camp on 1st of July in our branch. So please register yourself as soon as possible because we have arranged for 500 persons. If you registered in well within time, if we'll be requiring to have more vaccines, we can arrange more vaccines also. But please, 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 as far as possible, get yourself vaccinated as soon as possible. Secondly, friends, I'm dealing with not less than 10 cases of young chartered accountants who died due to wave 2, but they were not the member of the Development Fund of our institute. So their relatives, their young wives, they are facing problems in getting funds from our institute. Friends, I would like to share with you that in our institute, we have separated in just last council meeting around 20 crore rupees additionally for our members who are facing any kind of problem from this COVID problem particularly. So my request to all my members, all those persons who have not taken membership of Benevolent Fund, please become member of Benevolent Fund as soon as possible. And thirdly, friends, I have seen lots of my colleagues, my friends losing them in COVID too. But believe it, friends, all those persons which we lost them, either they were not physically fit or they were having some or other, like they were smoker or they were having heavy drinkers or they were taking tobacco in very large quantity or they were very overweight. In fact, believe it, friends, I myself got this problem on 25th of April, and for 15 days I was also isolated. But because on 16th April I had been taken second vaccination, and I am a regular runner and taking care of my health properly. So my even HRCT was 0. So you can understand that even if we get this problem, we can overcome this type of problems if we are having our own proper control on ourselves. So please, because from the morning I'm very much tense, the newspapers and other experts are saying that we may have lots of problems in wave 3. So at least we request you all, my colleagues, to take care from this problem. Friends, today's topic is very, very important. But I have to be blunt and frank, but our members doesn't want to understand that the traditional work which they are doing till now, in particularly in last 1 year, it has taken a different shape. Within not more than 2 to 3 years, we will be filing only one return which will be including income tax, GST, and not even for company, we will be completely covering Companies Act also. Within 2 to 3 years, there will be only one audit that will be a system audit. And I can prove it why it will be a system audit. In the month of March this year only, government came out with one of the circular that all persons who are doing audit of their companies, who are having clients in the shape of companies, you have to give in audit the accounting software, trail of accounting software of the clients. So you can give that report only and only if you are capable of doing system audit. So it clearly indicates, although that circular has been postponed due to the pandemic for 1 year, but we are very sure that within 2 to 3 years, our profession is going to change drastically, and at least our all routine work, which our most of the chartered accountants, most of the friends, most of the members, who are 72% out of the 100% people who are doing practice, doing traditional work, that work will be taken over by artificial intelligence. So now there are new areas, and I feel the startup is one of the most important area for we professionals. And in world, India is number one where maximum startups are registered. But at the same time, the worst situation is also that 95% startups get closed due to some or other reasons. But I have dealt it with around 8 to 10 startups, and my experience is one of the most important reason of their closing is that not properly managing their funds. Funds plays a very important role in those startups, particularly in those startups where the promoters are technical persons who does not have knowledge about the funds management. That is the biggest challenge. And I think in that position, our chartered accountant members can play a big role. But playing that big role, we'll have to have some basic knowledge regarding those startups. The most important thing in startups where our member can play a role when they go for presentation to different organizations, different promoters for getting funds from those persons. At that time, you have to show your total project, and at that time, how you will be managing your funds. That very important thing which a technical person cannot prepare properly, but there I feel a chartered accountant can play a very big role. At the same time, when they have agreement with the financial people who are investing in that their startup, that is also very, very important. Believe it, friends, because whoever becomes an investor in any startup, they very closely watch their total activity, and in fact, weekly they have to report their total working to the investors, and that is also again a very challenging job, which only a person like us at least can present to the investors that how they have to they are investing. We only know that how we have to present those factors, those figures. Friends, even lots of big houses has taken startup route to convert their black money in white money by issuing soft capital. So there are only very few lines where you can have even a different tax planning also. But I understand that in any startup, the chartered accountant can play a big role for tax planning. Now even that labor laws has come, although before this new labor law has come, we were not taking interest in labor laws. But the way now new labor laws has come, they have come with very, very comprehensive amendments and comprehensive topics, and it is applicable even for our chartered accountant firms also. So that is also again a big role where our chartered accountants, by having knowledge of labor laws, can play a big role. Fundraising, again, which I mentioned you, that in fundraising, chartered accountants can arrange for their technical promoters from where they can get at the same time presenting those figures financially with the promoter, technical promoter, is a very big role. And even our firms has played that role in 4 or 5 startups. That is a very, very challenging job. Again, you have to get registered in government organizations also for getting that status. So that is also again a challenging job. And there are 2 or 3 organizations of our government state government as well as central government, from where we can get funds for our startups. So these are the informations which our members should know for dealing with their client. Even I know some of our colleagues, some of our members who has themselves started different startups, and they are doing it very successful. So I will not take much of the time, and I will like that our youngest, one of the youngest speaker, Harshita Kushwah, to present us, to share her expert knowledge on this startup. Over to Aditi.
Thank you so much, sir, for gracing the occasion and really supporting and encouraging in many lot ways. And overall, humanity persists. So whatever you had spoken about the COVID times and the hardships faced by the families of chartered accountants and young members, it's a positive thing that everybody has contributed in some way or the other. So moving on to our session, our guest speaker, CA Harshita Kushwah, madam, had gracefully accepted this request to throw some light on the compliances and the fundraising for startups in India. Words may fall short, but I may take this little opportunity to brief you all of our esteemed guest speaker. Harshita Madam is a dynamic chartered accountant, also a company secretary, a chartered wealth manager and consultant with ex, expert knowledge in India and a corporate trainer who has also been working extensively with the startups and the businesses by helping them in the end-to-end financial and legal support services. She has an experience with the financial consulting, risk management, risk assessment, and has helped the business to establish the operations and operating procedures. She had operational expertise in building the global networking, the valuations, the business plans, and lot many in negotiations on the investments and acquisition deals. She has past experience working with the prestigious organizations like GT, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, and few other CA firms well known in Delhi and Bangalore. May I now request Madam to hear with comments with this session, please. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I would like to give my heartiest thank you to Prakash sir, Aditi ma'am, and Akash sir for giving their wholehearted support to organizing this session. Hope my audio is clear to everyone.
Yes, yes, very much.
Start. All right, great. So yeah, without further delays, let's begin with the session. I won't take much time on the introductions. I'll just share my screen first. Let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes, we can see.
All right, great. All right, so as we have already discussed, for CAs nowadays, and especially young chartered accountants, it's really important to break away and to move away from traditional practice. Obviously, that is something we have all learned and worked in during our articleships, most of us at least. But it is important for us to understand the new areas and new ventures in which we can start our practice and start working and use our expertise to help startups especially. So one of them being fundraising and compliance support for startups. And of course, Indian startups this has been a booming year for startups. For those of you who follow startup news would be knowing already that this year we have had the most number of unicorns, just in a matter of 6 months that we have completed in 2021. And we have had the most, active investors investing in a lot of upcoming startups in the Indian ecosystem. So it seems to be the best time for Indian startups at this stage, at this point. And, I feel that chartered accountants should also, contribute and can contribute to a large extent to that, development. So keeping that in mind, I would like to begin the session. Fundraising and compliance support for Indian startups. Now, to begin with, we'll just begin with very basic understanding of what is a startup. Usually, people do take it as in a general way, they do understand that, okay, any new company started or any new business started as a startup, but that's not the case. So if to be recognized as a startup or to be eligible to be identified as a startup under Startup India scheme of India, introduced by the government of India, we have to understand what exactly includes or what exactly is the meaning of a startup. So basically, a startup is a newly established business, usually small, started by one or a group of individuals. What actually differentiates it from other businesses is that it offers a new product, an innovative product or service that is not being given elsewhere in the same way. The keyword here is innovation, right? The business either develops a new product or a new service or a new technology, or maybe an advanced version of an already existing technology, which is also being seen a lot in the Indian startup ecosystem. So it can be a mix of different, types of innovations and technology usage in the product or service. But yeah, that is one of the basic, foundations of building a startup. Now, of course, startups right now have become really, really popular in India from, last 5, 6 years. We are seeing a lot of amazing, huge companies and startups getting funded, coming in the entire ecosystem and raising their, status to match with the and giving a lot of competition to large corporations as well. So in order to develop the Indian economy and to promote startups, of course, our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi you know, uh, had been leading our Startup India mission and Startup India, Stand Up India scheme, and well supported by the government of India. They have promoted this initiative to recognize and to promote startups. Now, first we'll understand the eligibility criteria for startup recognition under DIPP, right? So to gain all the benefits that the government of India provides under Startup India scheme, it is important for the startups or the companies or any organization who's willing to get the benefits or to take these benefits to become registered with DIPP. So there will be certain criteria that they need to fall under to be able to be to register. The startup should be incorporated as a private limited company or a partnership firm or an LLP. So that is the first criteria. Proprietorship or a trust or those kind of other organization structures, they cannot really become registered as a startup. So you have to be either a partnership firm or an LLP or a private limited company. The turnover should be less than 100 crores in any of the previous financial years. So this nearly matches the criteria for most SMEs as well. So a lot of SMEs who fall under the other criteria can also be eligible for startup recognition, provided they match the criteria. The entity should be considered as startup up to 10 years from the date of its incorporation. So from the date the company is granted its certificate and gets incorporated, from then on, the next 10 years, it shall be considered as a startup recognized under DIPP. The startup should be working towards innovation and improvement of existing products, services, and processes, and should have the potential to generate employment or create wealth. This is extremely important for registration. We have to, at the time of, we will go through the process of registration as well. And we need to understand this, that before a startup is granted the certificate of recognition from the DIPP department, we have to understand, we have to convince them that how is it that we are creating innovation or improvement of any products or processes or services, and or there has to be employment generation. A lot of times this point is also missed. So if there is technology is being used as an enabler in a particular startup, in that case they can also, and technology is not the core of the startup, even in that case, if they're generating employment or creating wealth for their stakeholders, it can still be recognized as a startup. This is a point, a very practical point, which comes into play when we are applying for recognition under Startup India, which a lot of times we get missed. say we have already existing entity, already existing company, which has been in play for the last 25 years, which has been incorporated 25, 30 years back. Even in that case, if there's a demerger or a reconstruction or any kind of M&A that happens with the company, existing company, then it will not be considered as a startup. So these are the criteria. Any company, any partnership firm, any LLP following under this criteria can apply for a recognition as a startup. Now, how do we register with Startup India? What are the steps? We'll just go through the steps one by one. First is, of course, incorporation of business. First step has to be you register as a private limited LLP partnership firm. You have to follow the normal procedures for incorporation. Companies do get registered with MCA, LLPs do get registered with MCA, and for partnership firms, you have to have a partnership deed and get registered. So all the basic compliances and all the basic incorporation procedures have to be complete. Then second step would be we have to visit Startup India website, which is startupindia.gov.in. And the process is very simple. It's online completely. There is no fees involved. So it's completely free of cost. And Government of India has provided complete support in that sense to startups that they don't have to spend a single rupee on the registration process unless they are paying for professional services, which they can. So the process is simple. All you need to do is log into the Startup India, register there, log in, and then fill up the form. There's an entire form with the details of the business and submit the documents. Once this profile is created, also, this is very important. On Startup India website, we can apply for multiple programs which are conducted by Startup India, by the Government of India. There are acceleration programs, incubation programs, mentorship programs, and a lot of challenges that keep getting posted on multiple domains, multiple areas. That Startup India website, if you check it out, you will find a lot of different competitions, challenges they keep posting, and of course, with time bound limits for application to these challenges, and there's a cash reward for startups who are able to win. So you can also help your clients as professionals. We can help our clients in assessing and making use of these challenges and competitions, because it is obviously a respectable thing to be recognized by, and to be awarded by the Government of India under Startup India. So of course, there are learning and development programs. You can network and connect with other startups who are registered on Startup India as well. You can take advantage and benefit of the government schemes, policies, etc. So a lot of free tools, resources, etc. are being provided by the Government of India on the portal. So it's really great for any young startup looking to avail these benefits. Now, third step, of course, would be to get the DPIIT registration, which is Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. So now here, DPIIT recognition helps the startups to avail these benefits. There is intellectual property services with respect to patents, trademarks. The government fees get slashed down to half. So for people who are dealing with all the professionals who are dealing with trademark registrations would be knowing that for an individual or a startup or an MSME, the government fees per trademark per class is 4,500 if you're applying it online. And if for other companies, for other organizations or businesses, even including LLPs and firms, this goes down to double, which is 9,000 per class. So generally for a technology based or a startup which is having a lot of patents or other trademarks to be registered in multiple classes, that if they're registering in 10 classes or 15 classes, they do save a lot on that fees as well. It's slashed down to half if they're registered under Startup India. So that is a very beneficial thing for startups. There are relaxations in public procurement norms, self-certification under labor and environmental laws. So depending on whether it applies to that particular company, that particular startup, based on that, they can avail these relaxations. There is, of course, ease in winding up of the company. If the startup is not able to run their operations successfully, profitably, they can easily wind up the company after a while. And the process is much faster, simpler. There is access to fund of funds, which we will discuss in some time, and then tax exemption for 3 consecutive years, being the most lucrative and the most, the area which is most in focus with most CAs as well as companies where they would like to avail tax exemption for 3 consecutive years. Now this, for availing the tax exemption, there are another eligibility criteria which need to be done. Simply getting registered under DPIIT will not grant any company tax exemption automatically. We have to apply separately for that exemption. So this needs to be kept in mind. A lot of times people have this misconception where they feel that if you're registered under Startup India, you will automatically get the 3-year tax benefit. That does not happen, but we will get to that later. Now, the documents which are required, it's pretty simple. One is incorporation certificate or registration certificate if it's a firm, the details of the directors, proof of concept. It can be a pitch deck. We will cover a little bit of details on how to prepare a pitch deck later on as well. We have to, if there's a website or an application, we can share the website link. If there is a product, we can share a demo video, or even otherwise we can share a video showcasing what is exactly that we are offering, what is the offering of that particular startup. So in case of validation or early stage or scaling startup, right? If there are any patent or trademark registered, those details of the trademarks or patents registration have to be placed. So if they are not there, it's not mandatory, but yes, if it is there, it really helps. And then the PAN number, which is, so these are very basic details which one needs to submit at the time of registration for Startup India. The benefits, we'll just briefly go through the benefits that this registration will provide to the startups. One is the patent, trademarks, and design registration. So like I already mentioned, if you need to apply for a patent, usually patent application is a very lengthy process and a very detailed process. It takes a couple of years. Sometimes it can, for a design patent, it can take sometimes 7-8 months to almost a year. For a technology patent, it can take a couple of years, or 2 to 3 to 4 years. Sometimes 4 years is a lot, but yeah, on an average, it can take around 2 to 3 years. So it's a long process. It's a very detailed process. So if a company needs to apply for a patent, they can easily approach from the list of facilitators issued by the government, and there's a reduction in statutory fees as well. So that's a double advantage. At the same time, I mentioned for trademarks also, if you're registered as a startup, the government fees get slashed down to half. Coming to funding, now of course, due to lack of experience, we are well aware, especially I think all the practicing chartered accountants and members of the institute would have received queries from their respective clients, regarding working capital issues and funding issues. A lot of SMEs are facing this issue, especially startups are facing this issue. And that is why the government of India has also been doing their due in the same. And because of the various issues due to which startups are not able to raise funds, are first, lack of experience. For availing any bank loan or term loan, you need to have 3 years of audited financials, you need to have projections, all those things. So of course, with new companies and startups, there is a lack of experience. There is, of course, there's no standard security or existing cash flows to show in their bank accounts, in the bank statements, or even, collateral to provide in the bank loans. So that is because of these reasons they fail to attract the investors. But because of the high risk, there's also a good chance that, like already mentioned by Sir, 95% of startups fail and stop their operations within the first year of starting, which is a very, very I would say a very high number, right? So if 100 startups are starting today, at the end of 1 year, only 5 or 6 will be operational out of them. Now, because of this high risk nature of startups, a lot of them.
हर्षिता, एक मिनट यहाँ लूंगा. जो जो मेरा एक्सपीरियंस रहा हर्षिता, इसमें जो इन्वेस्टर्स है ना, उनकी इसमें एक कंडीशन होती है कि वीकली उनको फाइनेंशियल और क्या डेवलपमेंट हुआ सारी रिपोर्ट देनी होती है, और वो एक साथ में रिलीज नहीं करते हैं. मेरे को लगता है कि वो उनकी जो वो इन्वेस्टर के पास में इतनी नॉलेज नहीं होती कि जो मेरा स्टार्टअप करने वाला जो प्रमोटर है, उसको किस तरह से पैसा चाहिए. वहाँ एक चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट का बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल रह सकता है.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. And at the same time, there are a lot of them who don't even get funded. So ones who are funded also can fail, and the ones who are not funded can fail due to lack of funding, lack of cash flows. So in both cases, there are, there's a large number of startups who actually end up failing in the process. So, or may even survive, but may not be able to reach their goals. Now that makes it really difficult to raise finance from investors and from banks as well. Now, for that, government of India has set up a fund with an initial corpus of 2,500 crores and a total corpus of 10,000 crores over a period of 4 years. And this fund is in the nature of fund of funds. That means the fund does not participate directly or does not invest directly in startups, but they allot under various schemes and to various institutions. Through these institutions and AIFs, they invest in startups. So they participate in the SEBI registered venture funds, which we will look at later on in the presentation as well. What are the various types of SEBI registered venture funds through which anybody who is eligible to become an investor or wants to invest in startups can also do so. Now, coming under self-certification under employment and labor laws, then startups get the benefit of self-certification under these laws, and the compliances cost are reduced, just like how we saw early on. And the startups are allowed to self-certify the compliances under 6 labor laws and 3 environmental laws for a period of 3 to 5 years from the date of incorporation. Now, the tax exemption, as we discussed, it has to be certified by interministerial board. So after you're registered as a startup, then this certification is also required, right? And this comes under Section 80 IAC of Income Tax Act. Startups which are incorporated on or after 1st April 2016 can apply for this exemption. And recently we saw in the budget this year that the eligibility of being recognized as a startup and availing the tax exemption has been extended to 31st March 2022. So we have roughly almost 9 months now for any startups who has yet not availed but is eligible or falling under the eligibility criteria can apply for that exemption. So these startups will be getting complete 100% tax rebate on profit for a period of 3 years in a block of 7 years, provided that the annual turnover does not exceed 25 crores in any financial year. So out of the 7-year period from the date of incorporation, they can choose which 3 years they want to avail this tax rebate, and it's 100% tax rebate. Doesn't matter what the amount, they will get a complete tax rebate on the entire tax liability of the company. Now, usually what happens out of this block of 7 years, they can choose any 3 years they want, but for most startups, initial sales is quite low, and they grow as they grow older, and as they gain more clients. Then at the later part of these 7 years, they usually prefer to claim their tax rebates, but it is up to the startup and it's their choice. Now, what is the compliance support required by startups, and how professionals and CAs can help them with that compliance support? One first thing and very basic thing is, of course, selection of the entity structure. A lot of times, a lot of people who have an idea, have a product, they know they want to start a business, but they're not sure what kind of structure should they adopt, what kind of registration should they go for, and they come to CAs for such requirements and such advice on such things. So of course it is important for us to give them the right kind of advice, whether they should go for a proprietorship, whether they should go for a private limited, whether they should go for a trust, whether they should go for a partnership firm. It is based on how many partners are there, based on what the future growth potential is, based on further plans of the business, what is the vision. A lot of things come into play when it comes to deciding the entity structure. So it is a very critical aspect, and a lot of attention needs to be paid. A lot of times, and I'm pretty sure a lot of professionals would have experienced this, where startups and especially young companies, when they approach us, or young entrepreneurs when they approach us, the first question is, which is the easiest in terms of compliance, or which is the most cost effective way of registering going forward. In that sense, a lot of them would not generally go by the private limited company registration, but private limited company incorporation provides a lot of other benefits which they would not be otherwise be able to avail if they're registered as any other firm. So that is a very crucial thing we need to keep in mind while suggesting these startups to gain these. So now, structure of the entity decides the liabilities of directors. It can be limited or unlimited in case of proprietorship or a partnership firm. Tax implications. Right now, if you look at it, for LLPs and partnership firms, there's a flat rate of 30% on income tax, as well as for proprietorships and other individuals who are running firms, it is based on slab rate. But for companies, for private limited companies, another big benefit is that now the tax rate have been reduced to even 15% for few eligible companies. So it can be, and for small companies, we're already aware it is standing at 25% if it is eligible to be recognized as a small company under Income Tax Act. So 15 to 25% is on an average the tax rate which a private limited company would be paying in India if it is registered as a startup and if it falls under the eligibility criteria. So that is a big advantage they have as opposed to being registered as a partnership firm or an LLP. Now, this is important for anybody who's looking at tax as a very important criteria for selection of structure. Then the benefits are there. There are statutory compliances, obviously, with partnership firms and with LLPs also. The compliances are very limited. You have to file only 2 to 3 forms at the year end. There's Form 8, Form 11, ITR, which is to be filed by everybody. So all these things have to be kept in mind, the kind of compliances. But yes, with companies, with private limited or limited companies, there's a long list of compliances that comes into play. Now, so ability to raise funds also affects this. So in future, if they're looking to raise capital via equity route or any other VC angel investors, so they need to register as a company in that case. Now, while deciding, they have to also look at the target market and the nature of product and services offered, which plays a crucial role. Now, organization structure, we are all aware as professionals, what are the various organizational structures under which a business can register themselves. There's proprietorship, partnership, LLP, private limited company, public limited company, even Section 8 company, but that's not for profit-making organizations. So we have not mentioned that. Now, coming to the first thing after incorporation, and apart from the compliance, which forms part of compliances or forms part of support that CAs and professionals can extend to startups. So first thing would be contracts, legal contracts. Now, these form a very, very important part of business and is equally ignored by a lot of companies and a lot of new startups, which should not be the case. So the contract defines the understanding between the parties. It can be a vendor, it can be with an employee, it can be with a co-founder, it can be with the directors, it can be with the customers. Now it has to state the roles and responsibilities, right? And the risk mitigation and define the liability of each party. That's very important, right? So it's important to have all the agreements in place and work under the same. Now, multiple steps in the same is offer, acceptance of offer, consideration, written understanding, which is the agreement, and then the agreement or the contract becomes enforceable by law once it's signed and sealed. Now, what are the various types of contracts and multiple other, this is not an exhaustive list. So I would say this is just an illustration of the basic contracts which most startups should have in place when they start. So one would be commercial contracts. It can be vendor, customer, franchisee. If they're willing to start a franchisee, then they can have commercial contracts of that nature. The marketing contracts with any agencies who are taking care of the marketing, any outsourced services, they can have contracts related to that. The SLAs, which we call, which are service level agreements, which are in place for that. Supply, this is again similar to vendor contracts. Procurement contracts for any goods, raw materials, finished products that we are procuring, and then operational contracts. So these type of contracts will be in place for human resources. There are founders agreement. This is between the founding members of the company, and founders agreement can be entered even before the company started. So even before the company is incorporated, this founders agreement can be entered into between the partners as individual entities, and later on, when they incorporate the company and they come up as directors in the company, join as directors, at that point they can have separate agreements with the company. So now employee agreements have to be there, letter of appointment and then employment agreement, which is pretty standard. Then consulting agreement for any third party consultants being involved in the process. Non-compete, non-solicitation, NCND, we may call it non-disclosure, also comes into picture with this. And then stock options, basically ESOP. ESOP structuring is an entire domain in itself, which is yet still unexplored by a lot of professionals. Another good area with really good, great scope for increasing a professional practice. Then comes the transactional contracts, which are joint venture, merger acquisition, investment contracts, which is your SHA, which is shareholders agreement, which is usually entered into when any investor is taking equity or convertible debt or making investment in any form in the company. Concession and project financing agreements. And then IPRs, we have licenses agreements, NDA, and technology transfer for use of IPRs. This usually happens when we have when we are giving out licenses or franchises for use by any third party. Now, talking about IPRs for any venture like tangible assets, intangible assets, they're absolutely valuable, and maintaining and protecting the IP of companies is very important, needs to be done since the inception of company. There are multiple types of IPRs and multiple subcategories, but if we have to divide into four major categories, one is trademark, patent, copyright, and then industrial design. Now, trademarks, as we all know, the word name, the brand name, and the logo. And we can secure both of them along with the same application. So we can secure the trademark, the brand name, and the logo design, as well as the tagline of the company in the same go. So any word, name, symbol which is used in trade with goods, services can be registered as a trademark. The logo, tagline, brand name, domain names, all these things will form part of trademarks. Registration with the IPIindia.gov.in is required, mandatory for protection, and a lot of advocates, a lot of patent attorneys, trademark attorneys do take care of this. There are specific companies actually handling registrations of trademarks, patents, and copyrights. Now, copyright is for any literary, dramatical, or musical, artistic kind of work. And the registration here is not mandatory, but it is required if you want to initiate a legal procedure against any company. So copyrights usually, or any piece of art or any work of art, usually based on if you have records of its creation and its publication online or offline. In that case, you can use it as a claim to a copyright, but to have validity in the court of law, it is important to have your copyright registered as well. And a lot of times people, what they do is, because trademarks and logos are a work of art as well, so first they register them as trademarks and then they get a copyright on the same trademark. That is also something which one can keep in mind. Now comes a patent. There are multiple types of patents based on innovation, novel, useful, non-obvious product, process, machine improvement, can be design patent as well, can be a technology patent as well, can be a process patent as well, right? The process of creation of a particular good or product. So registration is mandatory for a patent, as already discussed. It takes a long time to get a patent registered, and a registered patent attorney can help with the entire patent application, and can help with the entire process. This is something which is, you know, products where you're basically have any technology, major chunk of technology involved, and then you apply for a patent registration. Then comes the industrial design. Similar to a patent, any creative activity in the form of a shape, configuration, pattern, composition applied to any kind of form. And again, registration is required for industrial design as well. Now, intellectual property rights, there are three kinds of, three kinds of support services, which we can say that we can provide to our clients, or which the startups might need. One being IP protection, which involves the search. First, we need to search before applying that if it is already not registered or patented by any other party, or even a similar name should not be registered under any other name. Then comes the registration, any kind of objections that might be raised by the department, any kind of objections that might be raised by the third party, all addressing all of those, any kind of litigation that happens, then brand protection and recordals and maintenance. Post registration, there will be renewals. Every trademark certificate, every registration certificate comes with a timeline. usually from 3 to 5 years. And after that period, you need to renew it to be associated with that trademark as a registered owner. So that renewal comes as a post-registration service. Competitive intelligence, basically keeping an eye on which are the new startups, new companies, new names that are coming up who are actually using something similar or exactly using the same name as we have registered. So if you're a registered trademark owner, you can send them a notice. So that is competitive intelligence. License assignment. So assigning these trademarks is very important part of creating a franchisee or expanding your operations and giving licenses. Now, IP analysis, due diligence, policy process, agreements, commercialization, compliances, these are all parts of the management. Again, post-registration. Apart from that, there are multiple other compliances and licenses. We are all aware of Companies Act compliances, LLP Act compliances, ITR, income tax, GST, all of that compliances, I think, form part of traditional practice, which each and every CA is mostly aware of. Apart from that, multiple other licenses under different acts are also there. And CAs can include that as part of their scope of services, or can collaborate with people who are providing or who are experts in these services and help the startups with the same. So every business and every industry will have different kind of compliances to be followed. Make sure to comply with their statutory and legal compliances to keep it documented. Now, one is a separate host of licenses, which we have not posted the list of, but there's an entire long list of licenses and certifications that most startups will require depending on the sector. So if it's a food startup, or if they're looking to start a food processing unit, there will be an entire range of licenses they will need when it comes to labeling, when it comes to packaging. They have to make sure that they mention all the ingredients and the sources and the quantity of nutrients, etc. So there's an entire licensing done for that. There are FSSAI licensing, AgMark licensing, and multiple other areas of registrations, halal, and multiple other registrations which are required, fire license, drug license for medical shops, and multiple other things. So those are industry specific, so we can guide the clients based on which industry they are. Based on that, we can guide them as to which licenses or registrations they should be taking. Then there are certifications like ISO certification, etc., which are required under multiple, again, depending on the scope of business and the nature of business, it can vary. Apart from that, we have the PAN-TAN service tax, which is now not applicable for most businesses. There is GST there, and IEC code for exporters or importers. That is one. Then ESI, PF gratuity for employees. So organizations having more than 10 employees have to comply with ESI, PF, and gratuity norms. Board and general meeting norms, which are under Companies Act and LLP Act. We have to comply with the requirements of the Companies Act in respect to board and general meetings. Then comes the statutory maintenance of statutory registration, registers and filings. This is mostly done by company secretaries and in some cases CAs as well for a few companies. And for startups, because they cannot, at an early stage, they do not have enough funds or enough cash backup to hire multiple professionals. So in that case, if you're catering to a startup, in that case, most of the services are being provided by a single firm or a single individual. So in that case, we have to keep these things in mind. Then of course, Shop and Establishment Act registration, environmental clearances and licenses if you're setting up a factory, statutory licenses, as I already mentioned, for operations, and labor law compliances, including payroll and professional tax, which is payable. So this is about compliances. After this, we will proceed and talk about fundraising. If there are any questions on compliances, we can take a quick uh, questions on that, Q&A on that, and then we'll move to fundraising. So Aditi ma'am, do we have any questions?
Any members who wish to have some kind of a query resolved by ma'am are open to feed it in the chat box.
Or if
Yes, Harshita, you're doing on very well, because I'm very sure that most of our members does not know the definition of startup and how things can be worked. Thank
Yes.
you. You're doing well.
Yes, absolutely.
Very well.
I think this is the most precious cheese on our bread currently in the market, if I define it like that.
Yes.
So going absolutely wonderful. And so I may invite the members in between if they have any kind of questions regarding the compliances. So personally, ma'am, if I can just ask you, what about the MAT in this situation? You spoke about the rebate.
Yes.
So is that the thing gonna be like, flexible where it comes to MAT as well?
In that case, there's a complete tax rebate. So we, in case of MAT, what we do is we assess the tax liability as per Income Tax Act, and then we apply the MAT provisions and calculate. But whatever the tax liability will be, we'll get rebate. We'll get rebate on that entire amount. So that does apply. In my opinion, that is the situation for the entities on which MAT applies. We will get a complete rebate in that case also.
Okay, so first we have to apply and then we have to take the rebate. That's
Yes.
what you're going to
Yeah.
say. Okay, thank you so much.
ATIAC, there's, like I mentioned, in interministerial board recognition required. So once we have the recognition, then we can apply for 3 years. Any 3 years, startups can choose which 3 years they want the rebate for and claim that. So yeah, I
Beautiful.
think we can move on to fundraising now.
Yeah, I think so. If members, if
Okay.
you have any kind of questions, you can just drop in the message box and we can take it up with ma'am.
Yep. Thank you. All right. So we'll
Moving
move on
ahead.
to
Yeah,
fundraising.
absolutely.
Fundraising for startups, very crucial. This is the question the nation wants to know. So to say, how to raise funds, how to get funds for your startup, how to raise funds for your SMEs, how to raise funds for any kind of businesses for that matter. So we'll try and cover as many areas as possible, but there are many other possibilities as well. And there are a lot of investment bankers, merchant bankers, CAs who and finance professionals who are involved in this. So it is obviously advisable to associate or to gain knowledge and to understand from their perspective and from their expertise as well how they are helping the businesses, and there's a scope for collaboration. We work with a lot of IBs and a lot of professionals in the same field. So yeah, moving on to fundraising for startups, just to broadly highlight the multiple sources of funding. There is self-finance, which is bootstrapping. In startup terminology, we call it bootstrapping, when somebody is using their own or their family or their relatives or their friends, just like unsecured loans from them, and or they're using their own savings or investments to put money in their business. So that is self-finance and bootstrapping. There's private equity. So there are PE firms which are established, and family offices as well, which are established, which invest in companies and startups. Venture capital, and a lot of syndicates of angel investors are also existing currently in India and all across the world. And the good thing about running a technology startup is that if you're running a global, if you're running a startup which can offer a global product, you can gain investors from anywhere in the world, not just restricted to India, but from anywhere. So we have venture capital funds, and these are usually registered as SEBI registered funds, AIFs, alternate investment funds, which we will cover later on. Then we have debt and bank finance, which we are all aware of, the loans, secured loans, unsecured loans, which is right now the biggest issue for a lot of companies, because banks are not really giving out finance to most companies. So that is one, and which is the most, also being banks being the most common source of raising finance, and the first thing that most businesses go to when they are looking for that. Then comes the angel fund, similar to venture capital. It's again SEBI registered funds. There are a lot of unregistered funds operating in the uh, Indian ecosystem as well. But then they have their own ways of operating. So what happens with angel fund and venture capital? I'll just do a quick differentiation between the two. Venture capital funds, we have two types of partners. If we talk about the structure at the top level, so there's general partners and there's limited partners. So now general partners are the people who are running the show, who decide where the money will be invested, in which startups, and how much, how the structuring will happen. So they are involved with the decision making and day-to-day operations. So they charge a management fees of somewhere around 2% for the same, for running the operations of a VC fund. At the same time, there are limited partners, who are the people who put in money in the fund. So limited partners are the people investing in the fund. Their money is being invested in multiple areas, multiple reigns, and then the general partners take care of the operations. So there are two type of partners, and there are multiple other hierarchy structures and operations in place. For angel funds, it is mostly a group of angel investors. Now, angel investors usually invest in at an earlier stage, at a prior stage, basically seed funding or pre-seed funding. These are technical terms which mostly startups use for different levels of fundraising in their journey. So angel funds usually come at a very early stage. So they are a group of investors who basically put their own money, they compile the money as a fund, and they put their own money in these startups. That's angel. And angel funds also, what they do is not just the money, but they also help with a lot of strategic support and collaboration with the startup. So they, a lot of them handhold the startups from the very initial stages and help them in growing. Then comes the public stock markets through IPOs, FPOs. We can raise, companies can raise funds through public stock markets. There's a long list of SEBI regulations they need to follow when they're registering on a public stock market, on a security exchange. So that will come to later. Now, these are the sources. Now we'll look at the types of financing for startups. And first is, as I mentioned already, the personal source, which is own savings, equity. For very early stage, especially the ideation stage, it is advisable to go for own sources, and you should always advise your clients to go as much as possible and for as long as possible on their personal source. They should rely on a personal source and try and create a model which is more profitable in the long run. So personal resources can be profit sharing, retirement funds through superannuation fund they might have, or real estate, equity loans, whatever it is that they can call their own money. Then loans from friends and relatives, from the parents, relatives, friends, if they are willing to invest, which still most people, and especially in India, it's very difficult to get money from your parents or friends or relatives. But if they are lucky enough to have that, then they should go ahead with that. Then, as we discussed, venture capital. So these are funds, large funds, which are usually registered as category 1 SEBI registered funds, and they provide capital to young businesses in exchange for ownership. Basically, equity is or equity or any other form of security that they take, and they take a stake of the business. In return for that, they give the money. So the way of operating or investing for them is usually based on the valuation of the company. So there's an entire procedure followed. Once they decide they want to invest, first thing they do is they do a due diligence of the company. They check, make sure they usually hire CA firms or law firms for the same, and they assess the claims of the startup, whether the kind of claims they have made in their pitch deck or in their pitching, whether they are actually at the level to substantiate those claims and to actually uh, basically prove that what is the viability of the claims and the estimations and the numbers they have placed. And after that, they exchange a term sheet. There's a valuation done by a registered valuer, or even otherwise they can get a valuation done internally, and then they decide to go ahead with after the term sheet, they decide to go ahead with the funds. Then comes the angel investors. They are individuals who might, who invest in these businesses, small businesses, SMEs, and startups mainly, and they advise them they help them with not just money, but also advise them. So with angel investors in India, there are a lot of funds like the likes of Let's Venture, IVF, etc., who actually what they do is, as if you're looking to invest in a startup, you can start from as small amount as 2 to 3 lakhs. So that is also possible. And if you're investing in a group, in a large group, if you're investing as part of a group, you can start from that small amount as well. And considering that startups have been, the kind of exponential growth we are seeing in a lot of startups, it's a very lucrative investment option also, because a lot of our members might be interested in startups as an investment avenue as well. So if they wish to become angel investors, they can do so as well. And there are a lot of platforms, a lot of groups, syndicates, which are actually helping individuals to come together and deal and invest in startups in an organized manner. Then government grants, which is the most, I think, favorite of everybody, favorite source for everyone, every kind of business. Because it's a grant, there is no, mostly it's either subsidized, or there is no repayment, or the repayment terms are so simplified that it is obviously a very lucrative option. There are central and state government grants and schemes like Stand Up India and multiple other schemes. There's a new scheme launched this year itself, which is Startup India Seed Fund Scheme, which we'll cover later. And these provide financial assistance in the form of grants or tax credits. Then equity offerings, they can issue their shares directly to public or even to private investors, and they can raise substantial amount of funds provided they are eligible for getting listed on a stock exchange. As I already mentioned, IPOs are used when companies have profitable operations, their management is stable, they have been in operations for more than 3 years. Even the market making by a registered merchant banker is required for at least 3 years. There's a turnover requirement. So a lot of these requirements are there, and then you have to comply with the SEBI listing obligations and regulatory procedures, disclosure norms, everything. So IPOs is one of the steps taken by very large companies after they have raised and they have gained a certain stability in their income and they've established their presence. Then there are warrants or bill. It is basically like security which grants the owner the right to buy stock in the issuing company at a predetermined price at a future date. So if you decide the price on which you will buy the share today, which you might be buying after, which you might be converting into stock maybe 5 years, 3 years, 2 years down the line. So that's like basically a warrant or a bill. Then, of course, the bank and other commercial lenders. This is the most traditional form of raising finance. There are commercial finance companies, NBFCs, and financial institutions. And the businesses which do not have substantial personal assets or collateral can, rather than going to a bank or an NBFC, they usually go to commercial finance companies as well. It may not be the best place to secure financing, and the terms are usually quite harsh and very, very, so to say, difficult to comply with, but and the cost of is obviously very high. But for people who are not able to raise funds from banks or NBFCs, they come to commercial finance companies as well. Then the bonds and debentures. So it is different from debt financing. How? Because the interest rate and the company will pay back the principal. Those terms are quite different from regular debt financing. So bonds and debentures can be issued. And then for debentures, there is a separate list of compliances which need to be taken into account, which is basically appointing a trustee and a lot of other requirements which are there. Then comes the lease or rent. It's not really fundraising, but for any kind of purchase of or investment in any fixed asset. So for lease or renting of an asset, it's basically you enter into an agreement between two parties for using of that asset or the rental on a rental basis. It has to be a tangible resource. It can be a building, it can be a plant and machinery, it can be equipment. So leasing, renting can be one form of getting money to invest in a large asset without really paying upfront. Then comes the commercial paper. It's a very short term way of raising debt, usually used by large companies, already existing companies, which is unsecured, issued at a discount from face value and reflects the prevailing market interest rates. Then comes the bank overdraft for working capital. Banks issue OD limits, CC limits when someone withdraws more money from their account, and then it is available on a regular basis. Now, usually you have to submit your documents to the bank for availing these bank overdrafts and loans, and there has to be a successful run rate of at least 12 months for you to be eligible, for any company to be eligible for a bank overdraft generally. But yes, right now the norms are actually becoming a little more difficult as well. So for some banks, they have actually increased that time limit as well. They mention 6 months, but it's never 6 months. So you have to have a successful runway of at least 12 to 18 months. Now, bank overdraft is usually there's a limit attached there, and mostly just to give a rough idea, for most banks it is for the next 3 years financials or the next 12 months financials, the turnover which you show in your provisional financials, basically up to 20% of that you can raise as a bank overdraft. This is a rough rate which on an average most banks will give the overdraft on. Then comes asset-based financing, basically mortgaging your physical fixed asset like land, building, machinery, or factory. There's something called agreement for sale. under which also it is a kind of asset-based financing as well, where you give an asset that you already have, and based on the value of asset, you can raise some working capital, and then you have to keep renewing that agreement from time to time. Then comes a private placement. It is basically a sale of securities or shares to a relatively small number of investors as a way of raising capital, usually large banks, mutual funds, insurance companies, and also institutional investors. Can be other kinds of finance companies as well who invest in large companies, and usually the stake is held by a very small set of people or individuals, and this private placement happens. It can be done even through PE funds or even family offices. Now, these are the stages of fundraising for SMEs. So, at an initial stage, which we call the pre-seed stage, seed stage, or startup phase, when the company is not yet uh, launched their operations in a full-fledged manner, but they are yet to stabilize and grow their operations, and mostly running in losses, right? So at that stage, there's promoters funding, there's venture capital, private equity. Eventually down the line, they can even go for, at the time of emerging growth, they can go for SME IPO, which we will also cover briefly. And then there's migration to main board. Now we're just going to cover a few of these options, and in a little bit of detail, which are available to startups in India. Hopefully, so far, I hope my speed is not too fast. I just want to take a quick check on that. Hope everyone's understanding with the flow currently going.
Going absolutely amazing, ma'am. And
Thank you.
yeah, very, very knowledgeable, and many of the doubts have been cleared also, I think, I'm sure, for the members. So you may
Great.
continue, ma'am. If anybody having any kind of doubts, please put in the chat box.
Yeah,
So we
please
can
do,
take it up
please
in
do.
the
And you can also connect on LinkedIn later if there are any doubts. Anybody has any queries related to what I've just mentioned throughout the presentation. If there's anything, we can connect over LinkedIn. So I'll just give a detailed view on fundraising options which are available. Few of them we will cover. Like one of the most, I would say, hot topics right now, with startups are willing to or looking to find out and how they can, adapt to that, or get this avail this option, is Startup India Seed Fund Scheme, which was introduced this year itself. This is a very new scheme. It's a very new option of raising finance for seed stage startups. Now, what is Startup India Seed Fund Scheme? Now, DPIIT, as we already discussed, has created a Startup India Seed Fund Scheme with the outlay of 945 crore rupees to provide financial assistance to startups for proof of concept, prototype development, product trials, market entry, and commercialization. So basically, this fund is established for early stage companies who are still in the product development stage. And for these multiple areas, they can raise finance through this scheme and this fund. They're looking to support 3,600 entrepreneurs through 300 incubators in the next 4 years. Now, the Honorable Prime Minister of India has also announced that his in the scheme of his grand plenary address of Prarambh, which is the Startup India International Summit, that this approval about this fund and the approval of EFC, and the finance minister also has notified the scheme on 21st of January this year. But the scheme has been introduced but not yet launched. So we will see the applications being made from the month of July, hopefully. The portal is already there. The portal is already existing. If you search for it, you can find it. So Seed India scheme, and then it's a subdomain of Startup India. You'll find details on Startup India website as well. And this will be disbursed to eligible startups through eligible incubators which are registered. Now, these incubators can be government incubators or even otherwise private incubators. Now, the objective is obviously to provide the financial assistance to startups for proof of concept, prototype, product trials, market entry, and commercialization. So they will enable these startups to graduate or to grow to a level where they will be able to raise investment from angel investors or VCs. Now, what is the need for Startup India? Obviously, at this point, considering the pandemic, considering all the working capital crunch and the cash flow situation, easy availability of capital is very important for entrepreneurs, especially at an early stage where you need to invest a lot of money and time and effort into building the product, right? And funding from multiple investors becomes available only after there is a certain product being launched. There's a proof of concept which has been provided. Similarly, banks provide loans only to asset-backed applicants, which we have already seen in the last 2 years, 3 years. Even if there has been a secured, there are clients, there are people who have been looking at applying for bank loans, but because of multiple issues, banks have not been granting these loans or not being extending their limits. So it is essential to provide seed funding to majorly to startups who have an innovative idea which is technology backed, and to conduct proof of concept trials. How will this fund operate? It will be disbursed to eligible startups via the eligible incubators. Now, there's a list of incubators who have been recognized all across India. As we already mentioned, around 300 incubators are there. And Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, DPIIT, which is the nodal department, will have an experts advisory committee, which is consisting of government representative and experts, and they will be assisting these and helping and giving money to these incubators who are government assisted or even otherwise private incubators for and this is really important, the incubators only which have been operational for at least 2 to 3 years, because they do not want to give money to new incubators which do not have any proof of working or activity done in the last 2 to 3 years. Now, these incubators will put money based on the selection criteria, based on the compliances and the eligibility criteria stated by the experts committee, to startups which are DPIIT recognized and incorporated, which are incorporated less than 2 years ago. Only startups which are incorporated less than 2 years ago can apply for the seed fund. If a startup has already crossed a threshold of 3 years, still recognized under DPIIT, they cannot claim for this. They cannot apply for this. Now, what is the eligibility criteria for the scheme? For startups, this is very important for us to understand. For startups which are recognized, incorporated not more than 2 years at the time of application, one is that. Second, it must be a business idea to develop a product or service with a market fit, viable commercialization, and scope of scaling. Now, each of these words have a very wide meaning and very much open to interpretation. So if it's at this point it is only open to interpretation, and multiple other things will come out in this, but we have to wait and see. As they start granting loans, we will see then what exactly are they considering as eligible uh, criteria, eligibility criteria for this kind of business. Now, startups should be using technology as core product. We have already established that. Preference will be given to startups which are creating innovative solutions, not like a Me Too product, but something innovative, something disruptive, something really new, and solving a problem existing in the market. Anything with social impact, waste management, financial inclusion, water management. When I say financial inclusion, it may involve, it can include P2P lending platforms as well, or platforms which are actually helping the marginalized societies and sections of society to raise funds, or granting funds to them. For education, agriculture, food processing, biotechnology, healthcare, energy, mobility, defense, space, railways, oil and gas, textile. These are the listed and the preferred sectors, but they have made the list all. It's not an exhaustive list. There is, there are covering other sectors as well. They are trying to cover every other sector. Depending on the kind of startup that comes, they will be considering the eligibility. Now, startups should not have received more than 10 lakh of monetary support under any other government scheme. So if you have raised under Mudra loan, or any other kind of monetary support under any government scheme, it should not be more than 10 lakhs in the last 2 years. So, and this does not include any prize money from competitions and grant challenges. In a lot of colleges, there are a lot of competitions organized by the state governments or central governments, challenges, subsidized workspace, and allowances which are available under with incubators. So those are not involved. Those are not included. Only if there's a cash or a monetary support of 10 lakhs or above, only then they will be not eligible. Otherwise, it's completely fine. Now, shareholding by Indian promoters should be less, at least 51%. So it should be an Indian company by its status. At least 51% should be held by Indian promoters at the time of application to incubator. And the startup applicant can avail seed support in form of grant or debt or convertible debentures, each once as per the guidelines of the scheme. One thing which is not mentioned here, but you can check, and of course going forward with the schemes and the details that will be released, which are yet to be released by the government. There's a limit of around 20 lakhs for product development, which is in the form of grant, and there's a limit of around 50 lakhs in the form of marketing expenses or any kind of growth related expenses for startups. Those are the internal limits, and again, limits for multiple types of categories of deployment of funds. But with these limits for the product development, it's purely a grant. There will be no repayment of that amount. For the marketing expenses or for any kind of fundraising for marketing or growth point of the startup, in that case there will be a repayment, but it is at a very nominal interest rate, somewhere around 4 to 5%. Now, for incubators, there's another list of eligibility criteria. It should not be, less than 2 years old. It has to be more than established, more than at least 2 years back at the time of application. Startup should have a, one second, I think this is, yeah, this is a repetition of this, sorry. Yeah, this is a repetition of the incubators, but they have these eligibility criteria for allotting the amounts to incubators. And then, as already mentioned, the incubators are eligible for, once a startup gets recognized within incubator, they will be eligible for granting of these funds under SIFSS. Now, coming to the next point, which is investing in startups via VC funds or angel investors, right? Okay, I think we missed a slide here. Sorry about that. Now coming to this, we're talking about angel investors and VC funds. Now, just to explain the concept, like how before buying a new vehicle, we usually test drive it, and it is tested, even though the vehicle has been tested on extreme conditions, on land, on different terrains and different kinds of conditions by the manufacturer. Still, an investor, before they decide to invest, would like to know what are the kind of tests the startup has gone through and how will it survive, right? The testing times, when the testing times show up. So testing the idea is very important, and that is pretty much a part of the due diligence that they do. Now they test the viability of startup using different parameters with the numbers, the marketplace, what is the size of the market, the competitive edge, and all the fatal flaws. They test the idea from marketplace perspective, competitive edge perspective, which is how many competitors are there, and understand the various risks associated with it. And does a startup have a plan to mitigate those risks? Now, these are some of the seed financing instruments or securities, types of securities or instruments through which startups mostly raise seed financing. One is equity, which is the most popular way of raising finance. There's preference share also, which is usually convertible preference shares, which later at a later date will be converted into equity, and which is preferred in terms of preference of payment. Preference shares get upper hand over equity shareholders. Then comes the debt funding, which can be secured or unsecured depending on the situation. Government grants, convertible bonds, convertible notes. Convertible notes is a form of security which is not exactly debt, but it will be converted at a later stage into equity on a prior pre-decided terms. And then iSafe, which is a very new, I mean, it's not exactly new, it's 2 to 3, more than 3 years old, introduced by Y Combinator, which is an incubator in US. And now it's being adopted by a lot of investors in India as well, which is basically, it's similar to a convertible note or a convertible form of raising finance, but it is not exactly debt. So it's a simple agreement for future equity. That's the full form of iSafe, and it's one of the most I would say newest things to happen and to ways to raise finance in the startups. I'll just briefly take you through, though it's not related to compliances, it's not related to ways of raising, but yes, pitch deck I thought I should cover briefly in the entire space to give you a good idea about what exactly consists and what exactly is a pitch deck and what exactly are the components of a pitch deck which you should keep in mind, and you can suggest the startups you're working with on how to get a pitch deck made. You can take support of existing companies and corporations who are helping startups with creating pitch decks and create or maybe create them yourself. So that is my screen visible?
Not yet.
Okay, just a second. Is it visible now?
Yes.
All right, just a second. All right, this is just a small, you can say, illustration of what is included in a pitch deck. Pitch deck is basically a presentation that a startup will share with the investors at an initial stage, through which they are able to communicate the business model and the idea to the investor and create their interest in investing in the startup. So what does the document involve? This is not it's only a format. This is not exactly a pitch deck, but this is only inclusive illustration of what a pitch deck should include. And this is created by Entrepreneurially India, and I'm very much associated with the Entrepreneurially India for any kind of work we do for startups, which is basically an organization helping the startups from end-to-end support. So this is the pitch deck. What exactly is an investment pitch deck? It's basically a brief presentation which provides the investor with an overview of the business, whether it is showcasing the product, sharing the business model, or giving a look in the monetization strategy or revenue model, right? And introducing the team. Now, here the presentation begins. It's mostly very graphical. It has to be very attractive and very graphical looking. So it is important that it's not just the content which matters, but also the presentation which matters in the case of a pitch deck. Now, starting with the table of contents, what all areas we are covering in the entire pitch deck, we can start with that. Then a brief introduction talking about the product, then talking about the company, basically stating the vision, mission statement, and the objective of the company, stating the company logo, tagline, then talking about the team. The founders, who all founders are there, we can talk about their experiences, we can talk about their education, we can talk about their past success stories. Then we talk about the problem we are trying to solve. What exactly is the issue or the pain point that the startup is looking to solve? Then coming at the competitor analysis. In between, there can be one more slide stating the solution that we are offering, but we will cover that later. Then comes a competitor analysis. With every space and sector, if you look at, now you will find a lot of people already doing something similar. So if you're a health tech startup, there might be 5 other startups doing similar things, not exactly same, but working in the same user base or working in the same field. So we do a competitor analysis, highlighting what are their positives and negatives and how are we solving them. Then comes a solution, talking about what is it that we're offering and the features and the benefits. Then we can do a SWOT analysis, which is basically strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats. Multiple points that get covered under SWOT analysis of our product, of our startup. Then the product overview. If there's a technology-based platform or a product, we can talk about the product and the multiple characteristics of the product. Then pricing arrangement or the revenue model. Then a product demo would be good if there is a product demo available. If not, then it's fine. And we use more pictures, like I already mentioned. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So we use more pictures, more graphical details, and more try and make it as interesting and as attractive as possible. Then talking about the market and competition, which is very, very, very important. Talk about the traction that the startup has. Now, in the last 6 months, what the numbers have been looking like, what has the sales been, what has the CAC, which is customer acquisition cost been, what has the GMV been, which is the gross merchandise value of basically value of goods. So all these are technical terms which we can place as stating this current state of business, basically, which reflect the current state of business, right? So we can talk about traction in last 6 months, 12 months, what is the growth every month like. So all those numbers can be presented. We this is just a illustration stating that we more the important numbers should be highlighted in large fonts and should be presented in a very clear manner. What is the market size? What is the number of users we have? All those kind of things. Then we can have a case study of the user, our target user or our target customer, how we have helped them and in achieving the results or giving them a solution. Then we talk about our awards or rewards or any kind of challenges, competitions the startup has won. We talk about the market size, the value of the market size at the present, and this has to be very, very detailed, researched value. This is cannot be a number you picked up from internet, has to be very well detailed, researched. Then the target that we are looking to achieve, basically what is the customer, our target customer looking like, what is the average spend they do, what are the benefits we provide, so those kind of things. Then we talk about the major competitors we have, the business model in multiple parts of the business model. 3 years, at least 3 years financial projections should form part of the pitch deck. This is the area where CAs can really, provide their expertise, where we are helping them create a financial model or financial projections for the next 3 years to 5 years. And on the basis of that, valuation is also determined for the startup at that point, based on which equity will be granted. Then the predicted growth, which is again based on the financial projections. What will be our sales in the next 5 years looking like? Then we talk about investment. What is the amount of investment? Let's say, for example, 10 crores is the amount of investment. We mentioned the total amount. We mentioned the breakup of the amount. Where are we going to deploy these funds? The 10 crore, if you're saying, okay, 2 crores, we will hire more people. 3 crores, we will invest in product development. 5 crores, we will invest in marketing activities. So in that sense, a complete overall picture of where the funds are going. And then we can end the pitch deck with the contact details, which is quite important. Though it was not technical, but I hope this can be of some value for and similar formats. Already CAs do use similar formats for project reports, which we use for bank loans and project loans. So it's pretty similar, but for startups slightly different, because every kind of startup has a unique proposition, unique value, unique problem they're solving. So it's important to highlight on those factors. Coming back to our presentation. All right. I'll just quickly reach the slide where we were. I think this was the one. Is my screen visible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great, great.
Yes, ma'am.
Hope we are, what is the time? I need to check. Are we pressing short on time? I hope.
We have got sufficient time, don't worry.
Great, great. All right. Okay. Now we talk about some innovative or aside from the traditional funding sources like crowdfunding, we haven't discussed, but crowdfunding, we have multiple platforms on which crowdfunding can be done, and multiple other areas which we cannot really. There's a whole lot of different sources which are there, but we cannot cover everything in a matter of couple of hours. So we are only going to touch upon a few different types of sources which you can keep in mind next time somebody comes with you for with a problem for raising funds. One being revenue-based financing. Now, what is it exactly? It basically, revenue-based financing enables a business to share a fixed percentage of future revenue with an investor or lender in exchange of capital. So basically, it's similar to a loan. It's similar to a loan, but the repayment, basically in a loan, what happens, the payment structure is very well defined on day one. This will be the interest rate. This will be the payback period. So let's say the loan is repayable over a period of 5 years. And this is the interest rate, which For example, let's say the interest rate is 11%. So based on the interest rate, based on the payback period, they decide an EMI structure. So basically, EMI, equated monthly installment, is a fixed amount which includes the debt amount, which includes the principal as well as the interest. So there is a fixed liability on the head of the startup, basically on the head of the founder or the person running the business, that I have to pay this amount every month. Even if I'm going under losses, even if I have no sales, I have to pay this fixed amount every month, which is a major issue. It's a major cause of concern for most businesses, especially in times like these when most traditional businesses are already shut. Nowadays, the only businesses we see actually growing and thriving are technology based businesses. So, revenue based financing actually helps these businesses which do not have a stable business or are not sure of what their future cash flow situation will look like. They can, for a fixed percentage of future revenue, basically they decide a percentage of revenue, and based on the revenue they have in future, they will make the payments. The EMI is not a concept here. The payment will be based on revenue. It fluctuates every month. Now, how does it work? Now, for example, you expect 20 lakhs in revenue over the next 6 months, just as an example. You opt to raise 2 lakhs from a lender, right? And you repay the lender with a revenue share rate of 10% every month. So basically, if your actual revenue is as we're mentioning, for the financing raised is 2 lakh, repayment will be 2 lakh 20,000 based on 10% cost of capital. Now, how do you make this payment of 2 lakh 20,000? You don't have to divide it for an entire year and pay an equal amount every month. There might be some months where you might not have any sales. In that case, paying these installments would be a huge cash crunch and will create a cash flow situation for you, which is not really a good thing for startups, right? So in that case, what happens? The revenue share payments will be such, like if you look at the right hand side, there's a table, and based on the revenue we are seeing every month, which is fluctuating, which is different in each month, based on that, the revenue share payments will also change. It's 10% in each month until the total amount is repaid. So the payment will be 10%, but the payment structure is defined in such a way that you don't, it's flexible based on your revenue and based on the condition of business. Now, how is it different from, how is RBC, one second, my screen is getting cut. Okay, I'm just gonna cover this briefly. How is it different from other sources of finance? We've just stated how is it different. Target companies. Now there are a few companies which have newly come up in the last couple of years who are actually helping with RBFs. And similarly, there are multiple other options like factoring arrangements, bill discounting, and other things where similar to this, where you can raise finance, but in every mode there's a different structure involved. But the cost pretty much remains same. It's only the payment cycle, right? So the target companies for these kind of financing are consumer brands. The cost is usually medium, not too low, not too high. The returns are based on revenue. Dilution, there will be no dilution. It is similar to debt. Debt, there is no dilution of equity. Similarly, in RBF also, there is no dilution of equity. The control completely stays with the founder. And the time usually for allotment of these funds is usually around 10 to 15 working days, which is very fast. Similar to debt financing, right? So equity financing usually takes a long time. It can take a couple of months to 3 years, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, you never know. So it can usually take a longer time, longer amount of time, because there's a complete valuation to be done, due diligence to be done, negotiation on the control to be taken, on the value, on the amount to be taken. So all those things, there is a lot of open scope for negotiation and a lot of open scope for discussion, because of which equity financing does take a lot of time. At the same time, equity financing leads to dilution, so it leads to some control going to the investor, which is very very important to consider at an early, for an early stage startup, because you will be giving a stake in your company to an investor. So it's important for them to finalize the terms before they go ahead with an equity investor. Now we've mentioned all the other forms and mentioned all the other differentiation points within RBF compared to that. The benefits of it, of course, like we already established, flexible terms of repayment. There's no fixed EMI, no security is required. It's completely unsecured. No collateral is required. No dilution is required. So you don't have to give a board seat to, or like how it happens in VC funds, you give a board seat to a director who is going to be appointed by the investor. So there's no loss, there's no control given. It's accessible to a wider variety of businesses, the amounts of capital, it scales with revenue, and it is a new source of funding. There's no prepayment penalty. In loans, you would be aware that if you make the payment beforehand, there's a loss of interest income to the bank, because of which they charge around 2% prepayment charges, penalties. So in this case, there is no prepayment penalty. You are anyways making a payment based on revenue, right? So that is one really innovative way, and this is mostly for consumer brands, B2C or D2C brands, not for B2B. Currently we do not have many players giving RBF option available. There are very few companies doing this. So if anyone needs any kind of support or suggestion or help in that, they can connect for this kind of a thing. I can suggest some RBFs for them. And then comes the SME IPO. It's again a very broad topic. I'm just going to touch upon it briefly. SME IPO, most of us are aware of the traditional IPO, which is for listed companies. For NSE, BSE, stock exchange, you have to get listed. And for that, there's an IPO and there's a complete SEBI regulations that come into picture. Now for SMEs, there is a new concept of SME IPO. I would not again call it a new concept. It has been existing in the market for some time. But yeah, it's an option which not a lot of people are aware of, and they should know about it to if you're eligible for SME IPO and you can avail that that option. There's a lot of benefits involved with it. Now, what is an SME IPO? Now, all the small and medium enterprises who wish to go public, basically raise funds from public, SEBI has devised, the Security and Exchange Board of India has devised an IPO route exclusively for SMEs, where the enterprises can raise funds from market up to 25 crores. So there's a cap here. There's a cap of 25 crores that you can raise as an SME IPO from an SME IPO for exclusively for the small and medium enterprises. Now, for accessing the capital markets, there will be an improved credibility and visibility locally if you're getting registered under SME IPO. People who invest in SMEs, actually they keep a track on which companies are coming for SME IPO, and they do that you get a lot of visibility if you're getting registered and you're going for an SME IPO. So yeah, there's a dedicated stock exchange internationally or locally. Will get a lot of visibility in the market, which is set up in India. We have BSE SME and NSE Emerge. So Bombay Stock Exchange has BSE and SME, and NSE, which is National Stock Exchange, has NSE Emerge. In India, we have these two options for SME IPO. First question that comes to mind when we hear SME IPO is why? Why SME IPO? Now, these are the various benefits that companies who are going for SME IPO will avail. First is obviously help to raise the required funds for expansion, geographically or in terms of business, diversification, acquisitions, if you want to acquire more different companies. So that is one thing, you get to raise funds for that through the SME IPO. Second would be for infusion of equity through the public route, which will help the company to raise borrowed funds at efficient rate, which is also required for expansion. So if you already have debt, you will have equity, and then the debt equity ratio will be maintained. The fundraising through the exchange will balance the leverage structure of company, leading to a healthier balance sheet as well. Again, leading to a good, healthy debt equity ratio and DC, interest coverage ratio, etc. Listing will help you to generate an independent valuation of the company by market. So here you're getting a fair valuation done by the customer sentiment and the market sentiment of the company at a small level. As an SME, you get an idea of how the consumer looks at your company, what is the perception of the company, and how they value your company. Listing will raise company's public profile. Of course, you'll gain a lot of credibility. You will have your public profile, goodwill, being raised, and with your customers, suppliers, investors, and various stakeholders. And once a company is listed on SME Exchange, they can migrate to the main board of BSE or NSE, provided the shareholder approval is accorded. We will cover this later on. Benefits of SME IPO. What are the benefits? We already covered a lot of them, but just to summarize, you get relaxations from SEBI as opposed to getting into a traditional IPO, SME IPO. There is a lot of relaxations which you get. You get to maintain profitability, the debt equity ratio, repayment liability is quite limited. Dedicated trading platform. You will have anybody in the general public can invest in your company if you're under, registered under SME IPO, and any kind of anybody can come and invest in your company through BSE and NSE. Then the debt burden is lower due to lower financing cost, and like I already mentioned, projects, you get funding for projects. Now, what are the benefits? There are some tax benefits also with coming with the SME IPO. Now, this keeps on changing. So this is as per the data available, which I had, and there might have been some changes in this case as well. There might be some changes, so you can check up on it later on as well. So what are the tax benefits for SME IPO? Zero tax on fresh equity infusion compared to unlisted company, which is private company. Any fresh issuance of equity shares in listed company will not attract the equity infusion tax, which you also call the angel tax, right? So if angel investors are investing in a company and they're investing at a premium, there was an angel tax which was introduced under Income Tax Act. So in this case, if you're not a private company, you become a listed company, in that case, those taxes will not be applicable on you. Then there's a zero LTCG, which is long-term capital gain tax, or very limited STCG, short-term capital gain tax. So in general, transfer of unlisted shares attracts long-term capital gain at tax at the rate of 20%. And when the company is listed, the same will be nil. For listed companies, anybody investing in listed companies, the LTCG becomes nil up to a certain limit. The same unlisted transaction attracts a short-term capital gain tax of highest rate, which is 30%. But if you're listed in an SME exchange, it will be reduced to 15%. However, there will be STT applicable, which we already know. So zero tax on distressed business purchase if any business is under losses or not making any profits in the long run, if they've gone to a negative net worth. Then acquisition of distressed assets where value is less than the book value of the asset could attract a heavy tax. However, it does not apply. This tax liability will not come to you if these companies' shares are listed on a recognized stock exchange, including SME exchange. Now, these are the various guidelines for issued by SEBI for SMEs. So the maximum issue capital after post-issue capital basically can be only 25 crores. That is the limit. As we already have seen, maximum number of members for issue can be only 50. Market making by a registered merchant banker is mandatory, and he has to do this exercise for at least 3 years. Underwriting has to be done for 100% of the value of raise. Issue lot size will depend on number of shares, depending on the IPO price band. Trading lot size will be in multiples of 1 lakh, and after listing, no minimum number of members to be continued. These are the general guidelines for SMEs. The eligibility criteria. Now, coming to which are the companies who can actually apply for SME IPO. Now, for the purpose of listing, the company will be incorporated as a public company. So if you're a private company looking to get into an SME IPO, first step you have to take is getting registered as a public company, as a limited company, not a private limited company. So at present, there are only two SME exchanges, BSE SME and Emerge platform, and both have their own eligibility criteria. So both of these platforms, and if let's say there are any other platforms operating, they will have their own eligibility criteria. Each platform has its own criteria for SME listing. Now, talking about BSE, then we are going to talk about LSE. BSE, we have these criteria for listing on BSE as with an SME IPO. The post-issue paid-up capital shall be minimum 3 crore, net worth of at least 3 crore as per latest financial results, latest audited financials. So net worth has to be minimum 3 crores. The paid-up capital has to be minimum 3 crores. The net tangible asset have to be at least 3 crores as per the latest audited financials. Track record, there has to be at least 2 years track record of distributable profits of the preceding 3 financials. Out of that, at least 2 we should have distributable profits under section 123. and extraordinary income will not be considered. So these are the details which you can look at in the detail. If you have any client who might be looking at an SME IPO, you can look at the details by SEBI and on the websites of BSE and NSE. These are various conditions you need to comply with. The same goes for NSC. Now here the paid up capital, there's a cap. There's a maximum limit of 25 crore. The track record should be at least of 3 years. Should have positive cash accruals, basically EBITDA, your earnings before depreciation and tax from operations for at least 2 financial years. You should be in profits for at least 2 financial years in the last 3 years preceding the application, and the net worth should be positive. So all these benefits, all these SME IPO eligibility criteria needs to be followed by the company if you wish to register or list yourself on BSE or NSE. I just summarized. This is only a summary of what we just saw in the last 2 slides. So I've just tried to, this is just a tabular form of that. We have mentioned what are the, various types of differentiation points, track record, other requirements, and post-issue capital. We have multiple other things we have mentioned under requirements, which we have not covered, but we'll just take you briefly. There should be you should not be referred to BIFR, which is Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction. No petition should be pending. Company basically should have a clean record. There should be no frequent change of promoters. Nothing should be there on the record of the company which creates a suspicion in the minds of SEBI or in the minds of regulator. Now, these are the norms, as we already mentioned, SEBI norms for SME listing. These are SEBI norms, not eligibility criteria for the stock exchange. So public shareholding should be minimum 25%. Minimum subscribers in the IPO should be at least 50. Application amount should be 1 lakh. Underwriting has to be 100% for the complete amount. It is mandatory, right? And market making for at least 3 years has to be done of a document which will be not subject to SEBI observation. In this case, of a document is not to be observed by SEBI. This is the listing procedure. First step being selection of merchant banker. This is just a summarized version of it. This is only a graphical representation. It's much more detailed. You can look at it in detail later on. First, you start with selection of merchant banker, then structuring of the capital and the valuation of the company at present. Then comes the due diligence and pre-IPO preparation, basically all the paperwork, agreements, etc., filings with SEBI. Preparation of offer document, through which you will be, offer document is basically where you specify all the terms of IPO and subscribing to IPO to the public. Then appointment of other intermediaries which will be involved, basically underwriters, etc. Marketing strategy for the IPO, you need to spread the word to public. So there has to be marketing strategy devised. There has to be, you have to publish it in English newspaper and in vernacular newspaper. So all those things have to be followed. Next step would be filing of offered document with stock exchanges, then issue, launch, or allocation of shares, and then listing or post-listing activities. So these are the various disclosures and documents, just an illustrative list. The detailed list is pretty much, it's a long list, but yeah, this is just an illustration. Audited annual accounts have to be given, peer review by a CA firm. This is where professionals can come into picture. Appointment of a full-time CS, company secretary, has to be done. Appointment of 50% independent directors into the board. Due diligence on applicability of various regulations and disclosure about the risk factor, external environment, multiple other areas about business activities, objects of the issue and issue structure, future plan, strategy, and management discussion analysis. So all these things have to be disclosed in the with SEBI and with the stock exchanges. Now, there's next step would be SME to main board, and there's a migration that can be done later, like we already mentioned here early on. Once listed on SME exchange, company can migrate to the main board of BSE NSE, provided that the shareholders' approval is accorded. So coming back to that, this is the criteria for doing that for SME to main board, right? So you should have a paid up capital of more than 10 crores. That is the minimum which is required to be able to migrate to the main board. Other than that, the market capitalization, basically the market value of the company, should be minimum 25 crores. Special resolution has to be passed. That means 2/3 of the shareholders have to agree to it, have to agree to the migration happening. And on migrating, the main board will comply with the SEBI LODR regulations. So listing obligations, disclosure requirements, you have to comply with the complete set of SEBI LODR regulations once you move to the main board, right? Then you're not an SME anymore. You're not registered under SME IPO. You're, registered with SEBI now. Now, companies, directors should not be debarred by SEBI. This is very important. Application should, the applicant should have been listed on SME platform. You have to stay on with the SME IPO. You have to stay on the SME platform for at least 2 years. There should be no disciplinary action by any stock exchange or regulatory authorities in last 3 years. There should be no material regulatory or disciplinary action taken by any stock exchange or regulatory authority in last 3 years. There has to be a clean picture. There has to be a very clean picture of the company in front of the regulators and stock exchanges. There should be no disciplinary action pending or by stock exchange or the regulatory authority, which is SEBI, in last 1 year. So, and this has to be complied with by the company, by the subsidiary company, by the group company, by promoters, everybody. So all of this, once you have complied with, then you can move to from an SME IPO to main board migration. This is again a graphical representation of the same, just a summarized version. So prior consent, then you appoint an agency, then you decide a cutoff date for the same. Then the calendar of event is finalized, as in when various parts of the process will be finalized. Then same is intimated to the concerned stock exchange. Board meeting is conducted. The notice for postal ballot is printed. Then the notice is sent, published. The advertisement of the same will be published in the English newspaper and in a vernacular language of a nationwide reach. So this has to be published so that everybody gets to know that this company is getting listed. Commencement of postal ballot, and scrutinizer will declare the result of the postal ballot. Then, of course, the regulatory norms, which is your filing of form MGT 14, and results will become updated on the company's website that now we are listed on this exchange and this is the status of the company, and the results will be submitted. Now, how CAs can help in the same, and I think this is something, again, not an exhaustive list, just a suggestive list, and it can include multiple other areas. This is just a scope of services which we can get into apart from the traditional practice areas that most CAs get involved with. We can give merchant banking services provided you have the registered licenses for the same and the knowledge for the same. Of course, the balance sheet preparation, the certifications of financials, the valuation. If you're a registered valuer, you can go for that. The listing agreement compliance has to be done, so CAs can help with that. The financial due diligence, which is done, CAs mostly help with the financial side of the due diligence, and there's a secretarial legal due diligence as well, which are mostly done by CS and legal firms, law firms. Then with the compliance of, with the disclosure requirements of SEBI, can help with that. And of course, with the listing agreements, they need to be filed timely. So that is another area on which we can cover. Secretarial services are also there: brokers audit, securities audit, corporate restructuring, and unlocking companies' real value. Just describing all of these: due diligence, DRHP preparation, display of offer documents, assisting the company regarding the regulatory aspect, just becoming an advisor to the company with respect to issue, what is the procedure, explaining the documentation, making sure the entire thing, entire process goes on as per the regulatory compliance. The market making arrangement, for that you have to be registered as a merchant banker. So the merchant bankers will ensure compulsory market making through stock brokers of SMA exchange. So multiple other compliance requirements will be fulfilled by the merchant bankers. There will be an underwriting arrangement again, which can be given as a, you can help with the service. Merchant bankers will ensure that there's 100% underwritten, and 15% of underwriting should be by the merchant banker in own books. Then arrangement of nominated investors. So again, you can assist. This is again a more detailed list on the same: assisting in the IPO, preparation and listing process, advising on the capital structuring, statutory compliances, devising a complete IPO plan and strategy, even including multiple things, including, how do you go about with the valuation and other areas, right? Filing of the documents, of a document of IPO with SEBI and stock exchange and ROC, follow up with stock exchange and ROC for approvals. So all of these things, monitoring the flow of applications, coordinating with bankers, all of these uh, will be covered. So, I mean, this is pretty much with SME IPO what we have, and there's a lot more details, many regulations which you can look at going forward. And if you're interested, and if you do get registered and involved in the entire space, there's a lot of legal firms already involved in the space, and a few CA firms, who actually help with the same. Now, just a quick thing I've added in the end. We have already covered most of the parts of fundraising, most ways of fundraising. There might be a lot of members here who might be interested in investing in startups. So for them, it is important to understand what are AIFs, right? Alternate investment funds, through which these are basically the funds, SEBI registered funds. There are three categories: category 1, category 2, category 3, different kind of regulations to be followed, and for different types of investments, and different depending on what their objective is, these different categories are there. And through these funds you can invest in startups, or even as an individual you can invest. So if you're looking to invest in an organized structure, AIF has to be formed. So this means any fund established or incorporated in India in the form of a trust or a company or an LLP or a body corporate, which pretty much covers all of these, which is privately pooled investment vehicle. It's like it acts as a vehicle which collects funds from investors. It can be Indian investor, it can be foreign investor for investing. Just a quick, I'm sorry, hold on for a second, my battery is running out. There was a power cut. Apologies for the same, just a second.
No worries, ma'am.
All right. Yeah. So it basically acts as a privately pooled investment vehicle which collects funds from investors, whether it's Indian or foreign, for investing in accordance with the defined investment policy. Now, it is not covered under SEBI, mutual fund regulations, or collective investment schemes, or any other regulations. Now, family trust, ESOP trusts are exempted from this. What is the legal structure of AIF? Very important to understand. Three parts, three types of registrations can be done, as I mentioned: trust, company, or LLP. But right now, and then the last, I would say 7-8 years almost, trust and LLP are more preferred forms rather than a company in case of AIFs. Also, trust, I would say trust is the most preferred form of AIF currently in India, partly because companies and LLPs, pretty much all the information is out in the public. Anybody can pay 100 rupees to MC and download the information related to company or LLP. So to maintain the privacy of records and to, considering other aspects, people prefer, in India, trust is the most preferred form of structure, legal structure for AIFs. Now, these are the differentiation between the three forms. Compliances in trusts are obviously low as opposed to company or LLP. Client confidentiality is quite high. Market practice, we have already established 97% of AIFs are set up as trusts, and multiple other things we've mentioned here. Acceptability is quite high. Ease of operations is high, and mitigation of GST on management fees is quite debatable, but yes. So this is the three types of category, three categories of AIFs: category 1 fund, category 2, and category 3. When we talk about funds which actually invest in startups, mostly those are category 1 AIFs. So category 1 funds are the ones which invest in the startups or early stage companies. It can include angel funds, VC funds, SME funds, social venture funds. In fact, you can cover impact investment funds also here, and infrastructure funds. If there are PE funds or structured credit debt funds, those will be category 2. and long only funds or long short funds, hedge funds, category 3. Now, SEBI registration fees as mentioned for all three. Continuing interest by sponsor, we have mentioned here. If you wish to, you can take a look at that. And of course, restrictions of category 1 fund, although there are a lot of compliances and restrictions, but with category fund, it's quite moderate. So we are mainly focusing on category fund 1 fund since we are discussing about startup and fundraising for startups. So you can take a look at the details on the categories, and various regulatory compliances are also there. Now, these are the other legal considerations which about the AIFs, where you should have a corpus of at least 20 crores. Each investor should be committing to investing at least 1 crore. Again, for some of the funds, they have relaxed. SEBI has relaxed the limit. For angel funds, like it is already mentioned, 25 lakhs over a period of 5 years. So this is not a one-time investment. This is not to be done in a single investment or a single go. 25 lakhs can be invested over a period of 5 years if you're part of an angel fund as an investor. The employee can invest, or the director can also invest 25 lakhs or more. The employee need not make any, of the manager participating in profits need not make any investments. So all these details are there. You cannot have more than 1,000 investors. For angel funds, there's a limit of only 200 investors. So that is the limit, and minimum tenure of category fund and category 2 fund should be minimum 3 years. For angel funds, it is slightly more, which is maximum 5 years. Now, eligibility criteria. This is the eligibility criteria. You can get into more details on this. The process is also mentioned. Self-registration happens on SEBI portal, but legal compliances and assistance is required. So it's quite a long process. Takes around 4 to 5 months at least in India. And you have to constantly do, file all the compliances, get approvals from SEBI, and then file for an memorandum, and all those things have to be taken. 1 lakh is the application fees to SEBI for the portal for application, and you will be allotted an online like a login password, etc. Final PPM. Once final PPM is approved by SEBI, then it is to be taken to the other investors, and copy of the executed trust deed and declarations has to be given. So now we've written the entire process generally takes around 2 to 3 months, but depending on the SEBI approvals coming and depending on the queries that are being raised, it can usually take around 4 to 5 months at least. Now talking about foreign investment, which is also possible through AIFs. If you're investing in AIFs, people, NRIs or non-residents outside of India can also invest. 100% FDI is permitted under automatic route in all categories. For government to promote these funds, they have already allowed 100% FDI. Provided you have to comply with the FEMA regulations, you have to comply with other regulations with respect to that. Provided all of that is complied with, 100% FDI is pretty much permitted across most sectors. Okay, now we are just wrapping this up. A small disclaimer, the presentation is not exhaustive, as already mentioned. There are specific areas we have tried to highlight and just presents our opinions and views on the matters. And thank you.
Harshita, it's fantastic. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Frankly speaking, I was very much worried that a new girl, 2-3 years old CA, how she will be presenting, what she will be presenting. But you spoke so well, and the contents were exactly what our members should know. It is basically a very important information which you shared with us, and definitely we'll like to have your session in future at the large scale. Thank you. Thank you
so much. Thank you.
Over to Aditi.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really a very, very knowledgeable session, and it is highly commendable. And it shows your intellectual capacity and your strength to go on speaking on a webinar for such a long duration, and without even seeing the audience in front of you. Hats off to you, ma'am. And thank you so much to Jaipur branch and to Prakash Sharma sir for getting her associated with us and inviting ma'am to grace the occasion with such beautiful and knowledgeable session. So and I hope the members are satisfied and clarified with their startup related any kind of queries. If they have, they can just drop down in the chat box. And also members do notice that please drop in your membership number and along with your name in the chat box to avail the CPA benefits. So I'm sure that we would be hearing a lot from you, ma'am. So I open the stage to members if they want to have a direct conversation with our speaker guest in case if they have any kind of queries. So members, you can just come up if they want to speak up anything or share their experiences or doubts or queries. So, ma'am, I think I had one query regarding this. What is the difference basically between the angel and the venture capitalist? So, I think
Already covered, yes. So venture funds are more organized, large structures, companies which are, to simplify, angel and VC funds. VCs are investing money of other people. General partners are managing the fund and investing and taking decisions on behalf of limited partners who have invested their money, right? So it is coming from a pool of investors who are putting in money from multiple regions or multiple sectors, provided they, as we mentioned, they both can be registered as SEBI Category 1 AIF. Both can be registered in the same category, but the compliances are different for both. So angel investors are people who are actually putting in their own money, their own savings, their own investments, and putting in money in the startups and getting profits out of that. So VCs are more structured, more organized, and they have, teams to take care of the entire process of due diligence, etc.
oh, okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank
Thank
you so much.
We extended a bit from the time we I was planning to finish it before one, but anyways, uh yeah, apologies for it. I think you're muted, Aditi man.
Yeah, the session was really amazing. So it didn't matter even if you have spoken for next 30 minutes.
Thank
So thank you so much. So I think with permission of sir, I may end the seminar once I think all the chart accountants can type in the membership number and the contact details if they wish to. And ma'am, please drop down your LinkedIn ID over here in the chat box
Sure.
so that it's easy for everyone to get in contact with you.